Welcome to Prince Shorthand House, exercise number 17 and 18, Sir Kailash Chandra, 140 words a minute. Ready? Start. Mr. Vice Chairman, I rise to associate myself fully with the resolution and the concern which has been expressed from all the various sections of the House regarding the urgent necessity of developing rural industries. As time passed by, we are reaching a situation in our rural areas where something desperate needs to be done immediately if we want to preserve the social stability of the country and also to see that full use is made of the time and talent of the people in the rural areas which go waste today, as has been pointed out in the resolution. Sir, the Planning Commission and the Government of India have applied their minds to the various isolated aspects of rural industries, and some valuable reports have been published and some important recommendations have been made in these reports which need consideration. But unfortunately, there is no high level decision regarding the various issues which face the country as far as the problem of rural industrialization is concerned. We are not quite clear as to what, first of all, rural industries mean and that rural industrialization implies. Does rural industrialization mean the utilization of local resources in order to meet the local needs, or does rural industrialization imply the creating of surplus in the rural areas which could be exchanged with the surplus in other centers of the country and thereby create a richer life for the rural areas? Various opinions have been expressed with regard to this problem, but there is no authoritative determination of the policy regarding the meaning of rural industrialization. It has been suggested that if such import of capital and skill from urban centers were to mean merely the multiplication of industrial centers in the rural areas, such an industrialization of the rural areas would nullify the advantages that are likely to accrue as a result of the rural industrialization. The time has come when some decision has to be taken as to what we really mean by this rural industrialization. There is also difference of opinion regarding the authority that should undertake the responsibility for this rural industrialization. From the literature that has been published in this connection, it is quite obvious that two distinct and powerful schools have developed regarding this issue. On the one hand, there are people who believe that the task of rural industrialization should be entrusted to the village panchayats, since they represent the village people and they have to resources and the powers to raise the necessary resources from the rural areas. The panchayats, it is felt, are the competent authorities to deal with the problem of rural industrialization. Equally strongly, it has been argued by others that cooperatives are the right answer to the question as to which should be the authority that should deal with rural industrialization. I may also mention that there is a third school which believes that the import of private capital and private skill into the work of rural industrial development is the real answer to the problem which we face in the matter of rural industrialization. Here again, some authoritative determination of the policy has become necessary, because in the absence of such a policy, ad hoc decisions are taken which sometimes cancel each other, and therefore the rapid progress which we hope and wise for a rural industrialization becomes impossible. Then again, there is the further question of protection that may be necessary for rural industries in view of the lack of the internal economy from which rural industries would suffer. Whatever may be the answer to the first two questions, Professor Malkani has already referred to this question and various suggestions have been put forward. But all these suggestions require some detailed consideration, as there are a large number of difficulties in implementing any one of these suggestions. Demarcation of markets and the imposition of taxes in order to see that goods from the urban centers do not reach the rural centers in unfairly competitive conditions are some of the suggestions that have been made. One great advantage of a vast country is the large number of markets that are available for the goods that are produced in the country. However, if these markets are artificially restricted and goods are not allowed to move from one center to another, I am afraid more problems would be raised than solved if this protection is sought to be given in this manner. Yet protection has to be given to the rural industries if these rural industries are to develop. Therefore, serious and competent thinking is necessary in this connection, and again time is running fast. Therefore, it is desirable that we should have some authority which could examine the various issues involved, that determine and policy with regard to this matter also. Next, Mr. Vice Chairman, I wish the matter had not come up for discussion in this House in the form of which it has come, because we will be discussing, it appears, the same subject more or less piecemeal in connection with the other two bills as well. What was necessary for the government in this connection was to provide for a general discussion on the report of the Finance Commission, the kind of thing that we have on such reports, and after hearing the views of the members here, they should have formulated a bill. Even if they had formulated the bill earlier, the bill should have been preceded by a discussion on the report. It would then have given us an opportunity of dealing with this rather important subject in our public finance and indeed in our national life. But now we are asked to treat this matter piecemeal and deal with the bill as it comes separately. I say, sir, this would not seem very fair. It is true that we have had two other reports of the Finance Commission and that we have had certain opportunities of discussing the issues raised by the Finance Commission on various occasions, but that should not have precluded a thorough discussion of the third report, more especially after the experience of the 2 5-year plans and generally also after the experience of the states in the matter of public finance and as regards relations between the states and the center. All I can say is that the government does not understand the magnitude of the problem or the urgency or the seriousness of the issues involved. It is possibly because they think that all the state governments are under their control and that the state governments would toe the line whatever is laid down from here. Suppose, sir, today number of states had been outside the control of the same party which controls the central government, problems would have become acute because conflicts between the state governments controlled by certain other parties and those controlled by the Congress party which controls the central government would have arisen sharply, calling for a thorough discussion and mutual consultation in a different way. Once they can get past whatever they like, and also once it is passed, the state will more or less accept without any protest the dispensation of the center. Now that the bill is before us, we have to speak on this subject rather on the general themes. Yet I would like to make certain general observations in this connection because the basis of the bill is the report of the Third Finance Commission. This is a long-standing issue facing the public finance of the country. Those who have studied economics will know well how this matter had come up even during the British time when we did not have either independence or any kind of autonomy in the states in that setup. Even at that time, the state governments functioning under the British felt that something should be done with regard to adjustment of finances, especially in regard to the relations between the center and the states. There had been a long-standing controversy as to how the taxes, especially the income tax, should be divided between the center and the states. I do not deny the existence of the controversy, and this controversy is not easy to resolve. I entirely agree. But I should have thought that the Third Finance Commission should have tried to face the problems before it, not more or less in a routine manner, but in the context of the new things, not only as they are today, but as they are going to shape in the coming future. We have got what is called a quasi-federal constitution. I do not say federal constitution, although the spirit is there, but a quasi-federal constitution, because most of the powers, many of the powers that should remain with the states are now in the hands of the central government. Therefore, in that way, it is more unitary in character than federal. At the same time, structurally speaking, we have got the state assemblies, legislatures, state bodies, and so on. They function more or less in the same way, but if you go a little deeper into the affairs, it would immediately lead you to think that the states do not have any substantial real power, especially in the matter of finance. Perhaps at the time when the constitution was framed, this aspect did not figure very much in the minds of the makers of the constitution. We had just become free, and the concept of welding India into a solid nation was uppermost in the minds of those people who framed the constitution, and all others as well. In that background, it was quite understandable that it should be the dominant thought as to how to put the different segments of our country into a whole, namely the Indian Union. Stop.